Hello, good people. This is Sister Julia Walsh, and you're listening to Messy Jesus Business. Welcome to the mess. Hey, everyone. We want to find out more about you, our listeners. Please take a quick minute to go to the show notes, click the link to our survey, and fill out the form that the link takes you to. It won't take very long, and the information is going to be so helpful to us at Messy Jesus Business. Thank you. And now, on to the show. I'm here with Sister Norma Pimentel, who is a member of the Missionaries of Jesus and the Executive Director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley. In 2014, Sister Norma helped establish the Humanitarian Respite Center in McAllen, Texas, to provide a safe space for immigrants to rest before continuing their journey to other parts of the United States. The center has welcomed over 500,000 immigrants in the course of 10 years. She was one of Time Magazine's 100 Most Influential People of 2020, and Sister Norma is also an artist whose paintings have captivated numerous audiences. Sister Norma, welcome to Messy Jesus Business.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to join you and everyone listening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you again for coming to Messy Jesus Business. I'm been an admirer of your work. You've been someone who, of course, came onto my attention when Pope Francis came to the United States. Oh, what year was that in?
That was like 2015, I think.
2015, yeah. And he came to the Rio Grande. He celebrated Mass. And I think he featured you in your ministry.
That's right. Well, he wasn't present. It was via satellite.
Oh, okay.
And so he was at our church downtown McAllen. There was this ABC through David Muir 2020. They set up the whole altar area with a screen that was enormous, and so it covered the whole wall. And so that's where our Holy Father became present, and he was live, he was there with us. And so he singled me out, and he asked to talk to me. And so it was a very beautiful moment.
Yeah, I remember I was watching it, I think with my students. I was teaching high school here in Wisconsin at the time. And through the technology, I saw the light of Christ simply shining through both you and the Holy Father. And I was moved to tears with such a gratitude and appreciation for your ministries and witness.
Thank you.
And I became very curious about you and your story and your religious community and your ministries. So there's a lot we can explore here today. I'd love to start by just hearing your vocation story, really. How did you choose to become a sister and decide to enter your congregation?
The Missionaries of Jesus, I entered a group of sisters that came from Madrid, Spain. And they came because the bishop at the time went to Madrid and asked the Mother General if he could have some sisters come to his diocese. And so a group of them came down to South Texas and actually were part of this diocese. And then once here, they chose to remain here and be under the bishop, a diocesan group of sisters. And that's where I met them. It was something that so unexpected to me. It was not something that I have ever thought about joining a religious community, or I felt a calling to religious life. Not at all. I was graduated from college, and I was gung-ho in my profession. I'm an artist. I love to do things with my hands, paint and draw. It was something that I've always had since I was in first grade. I always loved to paint and draw and everything. Even my first grade teacher actually had me put butcher paper in the whole wall during the Christmas season, and I did the nativity. I knew I love art, and that was my goal in my life. And was gung-ho to go conquer the world with my art talent. And somehow, because of my dad not wanting me to leave home, and I just kind of stuck around for a little while, kind of redirecting my plans as to what I was going to do. And I ended up at a prayer group where a friend of mine, I kind of sort of felt forced to go because I wanted to go out and just go have fun with the girls. And they said, well, we're going to a prayer group first, And so that's where I ended up going to this prayer group. And that's where God got me. He became present to me for the very first time that I've never really experienced the presence of God in my life. And so that did it. And I entered religious life very soon after that. My life changed 180 degrees, and so I'm here I am so many years later, still religious.
I've heard you tell that story before. The last time I was with you in person, I was in the crowd and you were up on the stage, and it was in Chicago last spring at the
Okay.
at the cathedral. And I think you talked about how that was a charismatic prayer group.
Yes, it was. It was. Yes. And so for me it was something that I've never experienced before, people clapping their hands and really sharing their life story of how terrible they were, and now they have seen the light and followed Jesus, and their life completely changed, and it was like an eye-opener for me. I never seen that, and I was like, oh my God, look at these people. But God has his ways, and he touched me and in a very beautiful way that I just wanted to know more of God and really feel myself in every way possible. The God that I discovered, a God of love, a love that was very present to me from that moment forward.
Tell me about your community. Besides knowing you, I don't know if I've ever met any other missionaries.
No, I'm sure you have not, unless you've been here in the valley, because this is the only area that the sisters are, in the diocese of Brownsville and in the
Okay.
neighbor diocese of Matamoros, which is south of the border. We also have a house there, and so we pretty much never grew to become a big community. It was
Mm.
just a group of sisters, and I joined them. We've been very dedicated to in the diocese of Brownsville to in pastoral ministry. And I think that our religious community started at a time around, I think, when they came down to South Texas from that time the bishop went to Spain was maybe 1965, around there.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's a very new community in that sense, and
Yeah.
and it was in a time that people that were in religious life were living and experimenting different things, and so it was at that time that I joined the sisters.
I love it. I love the simplicity of your charism. You're centered on Christ and bringing Christ's light to the
Yes, that's
people.
right. Yes.
And you grew up in the Brownsville area. What were you
I
actually?
did. I did. My
Yeah.
family, my parents were from Mexico. My dad from Chiapas, which is the extreme south of Mexico, and my mom from Tamaulipas, which is the extreme north of Mexico.
Oh.
And somehow they met and they got married. When I was born, I always say I was born by chiripa, by chance, because in the United States, because my dad decided that one day he said, I want to go check out what I need to do to become a U.S. citizen or just live in the United States and try my luck, the American
Mm.
dream. And so he came to the border, the port of entry, and asked. He was with my mother, and she was pregnant with me. And so
Mm.
he asked, and then they told him he had to fill out this application to live in the United States. And so he did. He filled it out, and when he turned it in and says, "Well, I'll come back whenever to see when you have a response for me," and they said, "No, you can't leave the United States now. You must stay here until we give you a response." And so he was forced to put my mom and my sister and someplace so that until he could wait and figure out how to find a job so to take care of me too, because I was in my mother's womb at the time, and soon after that I was born, and so I said if my dad hadn't had the brilliant idea of coming to the United States like that and asking to see how he could come work and live here in the United States, I would have been born Mexican. So I am a U.S. citizen, and we grew up in both countries. We went back and forth a couple of years. We were in Mexico, and then he said, "Well, let's go back to the United States." And until my mother said one day, "You know what? This is it. You decide. You want to stay in the U.S. or you want to stay in Mexico. But the kids are going to school now. They need to stay in a one place." And so
Mm.
he chose the U.S. So we grew up in Brownsville.
How was it for your family when you decided to enter religious life?
Oh, they didn't like it. No, 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 no. It was a terrible news for them that I had decided to enter the convent. It's like, oh no, my hija, no, you can't do that. It's the worst thing you could do. You're gonna ruin your life. You have so much
Mm.
thing going for you, and then you're just gonna throw it away. I mean, somebody that goes to the convent is somebody that doesn't have a future, kind of. And
Right.
so you can't do that to yourself. And I told my dad, he said, "You know what, Dad? I know you always have the answer for everything, but here I know you're wrong because this has to do with God, And so
Mm.
this is where he's above you, And so that's how it happened. And at first, my parents were not very happy at all. Things started to change for them, and how they view the fact that I entered religious life was when I started to get more involved with the religious group of sisters that I joined. Were already, when I entered, connected with immigrants, because Border Patrol at the time, which was not that big of a people coming into the United States, but they didn't have a place to put women and children. And so they
Mm.
would always call the sisters and ask, can I take you, this mom with this child? We're going to release them to your care. And when I entered religious life, we always had a mother with a child, an immigrant family with us. And so I was already involved in what it meant to have refugees live with them in community and care for them. And so this is what I was introduced to, since day one when I entered religious life.
So it's always been a service to the immigrant, to the people in transit, the migrant people around the border. That's been the center of your world. It sounds like the center of your life.
Right from day one. And especially because this land, the stretch of land that is between two countries, the southern part of the United States, which is the tip of Texas, it's a middle ground that connects two countries, and most
Mm-hmm.
people that are here in this area are families that are from Mexico. They either have families over there and have families here, and we were all sort of like from both countries, And so
Yeah.
being an immigrant in one way or another, we all kind of see ourselves as family, as, somos familia.
Can I go back to that moment when you said, you might not like this, Dad, but I'm doing it. I'm entering religious life. I'm
Yes.
hearing there how maybe you were feisty because you were young, but really, I think this demonstrates this character trait of courage that you had.
Well, I'm very daring, Ever since I can remember, I'm never afraid. Even though I'm afraid of stuff, I still
Yeah.
push myself to do things, I believe in something and I do it, Even if I'm scared, I still do it. And the religious life for me was like, if I think back and look at that moment when I decided that things changed for me, I discovered a God that for the very first time was a very personal presence in my life,
Mm.
that I felt the love and the amazing presence of God in a very special way that I have never experienced before. My parents, as I was growing up, was always talk to me about God that is going to punish me if I didn't behave
Oh.
well, And so I didn't see a God that is relatable. It's one that's out looking at me and checking me to see if I'm behaving. If not, I'm going to get sapped, or something,
Yeah.
And so I never knew that God was really a beautiful presence of love that I totally blew me off my feet, And so I wanted to know more. I wanted to discover more of this God. And so I felt like all of a sudden I discovered a treasure, and I didn't care of anything else but that treasure, That
Mm.
presence of God that was so, I don't know, awakening me that I wanted to just just completely immerse myself in it, And so the sisters happened to be in that little prayer group that I entered, and so they invited me to a vocational retreat, and I had no clue what that was. For me, it only meant that I could get out of the house, and my dad would not mind that I would leave and sleep somewhere else, And so I ended up being asked, "Do you think God could be calling you to religious life?" And, I thought about it and I said, well, if it's anything having to do with how I feel right now, more of this, I definitely consider it. And
Mm.
that's where I'm the kind of person that I'll go for it, because I think it captivated my attention so vividly and so strongly that, yes, why not? And so I enter religious life.
What I hear here that I think is especially important to highlight is how the image of God that you were given in your childhood, once that changed and you knew God less of a threat, but more of as love, then this transformed you and it transformed the direction of your life.
That's right. That's how it happened. And once I entered, I also encountered the presence of a religious sister, an older sister who became my mentor. And she
Mm.
was from Spain. And she was, you would say, the now version of Mother Teresa of Avila. That was the type of personality that she had. She was an amazing woman with great faith. And when she spoke, I always felt like I wanted to know more about what she had to say, and she was a wonderful mentor in helping me understand things that for me, everything was new, and so she guided me to learn about God more and about learning about my faith and about what the Catholic Church is all about. And so, as part of my formation, I remember because I was at completely zero at what it come to faith and church and who all of this was. So I was like a sponge taking everything in, and so aside from the year that I spent in my novitiate being in formation and learning about so many things about my faith and religion and everything, I was also sent to get my master's in theology at St. Mary's in San Antonio. And so while I was there, I was a sponge. I always say I'm a sponge because everything I heard in the class is like was new to me. It was like completely something that I have never heard ever in my life. When they start talking about scripture, I thought it was just going to be the Bible stories, and it was beyond me. And so I started to just completely educate myself in understanding the Catholic Church and what this is all about, and how that becomes part of our lives and who we are as people of faith. And so my whole journey in the church began.
What did you discover in those years?
I found out that honestly, when I even graduated and I got my master's in theology, I discovered how little I knew. And it sort of opened the door to understand that there's so much more to know. I've learned so much, but at the same time, it was nothing to compare to what I saw beyond that I needed to learn and discover, about God and about church and about who we are. And it just, it's like scales fell off my eyes and I began to see better about everything.
As you describe that, it reminds me of how when I was young and sort of deciding for myself that I was going to commit to this Catholic identity, I wasn't sure yet about sisterhood, but that's when I became introduced to Catholic social teaching. And I also at the same time came to love many devotions and appreciate really the depth of our spirituality, the diversity of spirituality that's available within our church. So there's this great depth, but then there's also this breadth, this incredible wideness, not only in who God is and in God's mercy, it's infinite goodness,
Yes.
but it's also this wideness and what it means to be Catholic. It's not just this narrow idea that I probably was presented in my home parish or in my own family.
Mm-hmm.
As I got to experience the wideness of that, I felt so excited to know that this was all valid and legit ways to be a person of faith. And I began to feel more at home in the church.
Yes. It makes a difference when you feel at home and you feel you belong and you're in the right place, that it all makes sense.
Yeah. I'm curious how you come to think about mission. What is the mission of the church? What is our mission as disciples of Jesus Christ?
The more I've journeyed through the years in my life, in my ministry, and my dedication as a religious to serve the church and God and the people in my community and in my church, the more I've come to discover that my journey has been to learn how to love myself and love others, how I can become present, the God that I encounter, that I discover in my daily going to the Eucharist and making part of my life, and how I can bring that presence, that love, that hope to others through the God that is in me, that loves me, that understands me, that is present to me in a caring, wonderful way. And my way of relating with everyone that I encounter in my life, especially the most vulnerable and fragile and in great need of God's presence because they're hurting and they need someone to care for them. I've come that my presence can be healing, my presence can bring hope to them, and just by being myself, by really being authentically present to them, I've come to discover that that's all I need to do, and that's how I minister to every single one that God puts in my life, at every moment of my days, And
Yeah.
so I think that's my mission, that and how to fulfill that in every special way, that every single person matters, and every person that I encounter in some way, God has put that in front of me, because through that encounter, through that opportunity to be present to each other, we discover more profoundly the presence of God,
Yeah.
and are blessed from that, And so that's what I've come to discover as the years I've walked as a religious, and my dedication to serve the church in different ministries. The one I have walked through the most has been in being present to the immigrants and the families who are struggling and encountering themselves in very difficult time of their life, and I become a vital part of that moment in their life, where I bring a breeze of fresh air to their life in a moment that they're most they are at a point where they've been hurting and tired and scared and frightened, and can feel the presence of love that God has for us in that encounter, in that moment that we come together to smile and to offer some kind of care for them. It's almost as if they've got some fresh water that refreshes
Mm.
them and makes them feel that there's somebody that God loves, just by the fact that they matter to somebody else, And
Yeah.
so I've come to discover that that is what my mission is, what my purpose in life is, and what my role as religious is to live that out as every opportunity I have.
And so you're doing that now in maybe more of a public way, as the public figure you have become as a speaker and so on, but also as an administrator, the executive director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, but then in very particular and personal ways as you encounter those that are on the journey, that are in need, through your presence that you offer to them when you're doing direct service and you're offering them the works of mercy, the food, the shelter, the clothing, the water.
Yes, yes. That becomes the most important part of my day, my life, my responsibility is more of that than administrating Catholic charities. I built up a team of staff and people that are committed to work together to oversee the operations and the programs and the needs that we respond to address food insecurity, to prevent homelessness, to care for the homeless, to care for the immigrants. But all those different initiatives that we start, we have staff now that oversee those things, and so it leaves me free to be able to do other things, to be able to connect with other people that can support and join in this mission to make a difference in the life of others, whether it's by helping through funding or through volunteering, or simply just to join me in going and meeting people and being present to them. And so I find that that is what my mission today is,
Mm,
being free to do that is really fulfilling the mission that I believe God has for me today.
mm. Yeah. So you're a bit of a connector, really.
I think you're right. I've never thought about myself as a connector, but now that you say it, I think it is what I do. I try to connect goodness with more goodness, and with people that need help, with those that want to help.
So I'm really far away from the Texas Mexico border. I'm in Wisconsin as I have this conversation. I also spend a lot of time in Chicago. I have only been to Nogales, Arizona. I'd love for you to describe the realities for our listeners, for those who have never been to the borders. What is it really like? What is going on? What do we need to know about and pray about?
The Rio Grande Valley is, like I had said, it's a stretch of land of 4 counties that is right at the border of the U.S. at the border where the river is, and then Mexico. This stretch of land is, for me, home. It's a place where I've grew up and I live here all my life and pretty much know almost a lot of people from here. It's like a lot of tiny little cities that are a
Mm.
stretch of land from the tip of Texas, Brownsville, all the way to Roma, Texas. And people are very simple. People, most of them, if not all of them, are immigrants. And they're very connected with immigrants that are also attempting to enter the United States in search of safety, in search of protection, in search of a life. And because they possibly also came at one point in similar ways, whether they did through a visa or simply through crossing the river as well. In the Mexican side, there's all these little towns that are very poor because Mexico is a very poor country. People really struggle to have the bare essentials in life. If they work, they have a secure job. They probably don't get paid very high wages. It's
Yeah.
I mean, if they make $50 a week, that's a lot.
Mm.
But it's secure in something they can look forward to having every Friday or whatever they get paid. They live a very simple, limited life, with resources and things that you need to exist. And so many of them are immigrants that settled in those areas. And so these little towns are also exploited by gangs and by cartels that many times they're not sure whether they're going to come in and try to take advantage of them by saying, okay, if you want to stay here, you need to pay me a regular
Mm.
rent for living in this area. Many of them fear for that. And in the Mexican
Mm.
side, that's what happens a lot. And this is something that just happens most recently, in the past couple of years. When I was growing up, it was not like that. It was a very
Mm.
safe area, Mexico. But as time has progressed, especially now, in the most recent years, Mexico has become more of a unsafe space to be in because of cartels and gangs, and so people are always afraid that maybe they could get kidnapped, maybe they could get hurt, or something could happen to their children. And so that's the reality of Mexico in many cases. And so families that journey from other countries kind of sort of are forced to remain in those cities that are by the river in the Mexican side, waiting and hoping of the time they could enter the United States because they're coming from countries from far away. Most of them were at least from Central America and now from South America and other countries beyond that. And their journeys are very difficult. They encounter many people that may take advantage of them, exploit them, possibly kidnap them, and so they're always afraid of who might hurt them. All of these people end up at those cities along the river in the Mexican side, waiting for the opportunity to enter the United States, possibly through the port of entry, because
Mhm.
this present government has established a means how you can enter the United States legally and safely by asking for an appointment. And you can do that through your telephone and an app that they created. And
Mm.
people can actually sign up and say, I would like an opportunity to be interviewed so that I could be in the United States asking for asylum, because I'm
Mm.
fear for my life in my country because of the violence and what's happening over there. This is something that this administration started, and it's very successful because it gives people an opportunity to enter in a safe way into the United States and not risk their lives and through the river. This is so
Mm.
dangerous. People die in the river for many reasons. There's always this struggle of how to be safe, how to make sure you're
Mm.
protected, and how can you stay in an area, in a shelter or a place where people can at least protect you from anyone hurting you. This is what you will see at the border in the Mexican side, and in the US side. It's really a very nice. Many people think that here in the South Texas along the border, it must be very dangerous, because they hear all these people entering the country. But in reality, it's not. The valley is one of the safest places in the United States. The crime rate is way lower than any other place. For me, this is home, and I feel that most people in this area are people with a big heart. They care about each other, they help each other out. I would say that we're family. That's why we see each other as family. And so we reach out and help each other in ways where we can help. And so when we see immigrants enter the United States and find themselves in our community, we come and help. One of the things that I say when people come to our center that we started with Catholic Charities and Border Patrol brings them to us, once they enter our center, the very first thing that I ask is, ¿Cómo estás? How are you? And it's for the very first time that someone that has been through so many difficult times, and fear for their lives and their children, not having anything to eat sometimes, probably sleeping in the grass, in the ground, and really finding themselves with their feet all blistered, for all the walking they did, and their shoes torn, and they walk without shoes, and they end up with us in a very poor conditions. It's for the very first time that they see someone say, "How are you?" And it's like they matter. You can start seeing in them the transformation in their faces. I hear them say, like, thank you, God, for taking care of me and bringing me to this safe space. This is what, for me, is the Rio Grande Valley and the border in South Texas with Mexico.
You've really painted a picture there. And I'm hearing how in the midst of so much struggle, suffering, maybe even injustice or oppression, violence for sure, danger, there's resilience, there's strength, there is compassion, there's mercy. There's very human ways that people are caring for one another and honoring one another's dignity and greeting them and welcoming them too. What I'm hearing is somehow in the midst of what can feel very overwhelming and heavy, complicated, you persist. You continue to stay faithful to the mission that you already named, which is to offer the loving presence of Christ to those that are right there in front of you. And really, you're empowering other people to do that through the work of Catholic Charities and all the ways that you serve and care for folks.
Yes, I think you just named it so well. What is happening here and how many people actually do all that as a way to make their faith alive, lived out their faith in a beautiful way, but just by being themselves, and caring for those that we see obviously need help, and we're there for them.
It sounds like there's freedom from judgment and freedom from fear in the midst of all that too.
Yes, I think so. I think it's unfortunate that a lot of times the image that we get of immigrants is so negative that it almost puts us in fear of them. I think if you really get to know them and see that they're just like us, they're a mother, a brother, a child that needs the same needs that we have, and that are so grateful for the care and attention that we give them. It's really a way to, as I describe it, when I describe what we do here with the immigrants, is we're restoring human dignity. We're giving them a chance to feel the blessings that God gives them just because they're a child of God. And for no other reason for that you have a right, like I do, to enjoy the things that life gives us, like water, or a shower, or an opportunity to put on clean clothes, or eating a warm plate of food, all those things that it's part of what God gives us, and they have every right to that. It makes us human.
Yes, right. We're truly honoring the God in each other and how we are all God's beloved children each time we do these simple acts. Yes. Now, Sister Norma, I'm conscious too of the challenge that our faith, our church documents give us to advocate for justice and protest when things are not fair and going according to the vision of God that we've inherited through our tradition. And this reminds me of how, when I heard you speak at the cathedral, I heard you tell a story about a protest that you did when you were a new sister. So I wonder if you would share that story with our listeners, please.
I don't know if it was so much a protest, but I was very young. I had just entered religious life, and We were given by our bishop the responsibility to oversee a shelter for immigrants that were just arriving and back then in the 80s. They were just arriving to the U.S. and they had not even been processed by Border Patrol or anything. They just crossed the river and they ended up at our shelter all wet and muddy. And basically, we just took them in and we gave them a place where they could get cleaned up. And
Yeah, sounds like the Christian thing to do. Good
right.
job.
And that's what we did. And we were getting them from Guatemala and Salvador. And in those countries at the time, they were going through a very war torn country that there was a lot of killings and things that the families that were arriving were sharing their stories. And there were devastating stories of how the army was torturing them in very harsh, horrible ways. And we just knew that we were two sisters, Sister Juliana and myself, that were at this shelter that the bishop asked us to receive these families and offer them just humanitarian care. And they were there with us for a couple of days and they moved on. They just walked in, took care of them, and walked out. And that's what they did. And we were just like an oasis for them in their journey into the United States. And one time, the sister said, as we were going to lunch, she said, Norma, today during our lunch hour, we're going to go support a group of women and people from the community that are speaking to our congressman and asking why he's in favor of sending $1 million a day to buy arms to these countries where we know
Mm.
people are hurting and we see the atrocities that this money is causing. So let's go support this group of people that are questioning our congressman for being in favor of doing this. I said, sure. I had no idea what exactly was happening. When we arrived there during our lunch hour, the person that oversaw the building was very upset that this group was there singing and praying and waiting for the congressman to respond from Washington. And he called the police and said, I don't want these people in this office, so arrest them. And
Oh,
so we had just arrived, and all of a sudden, everybody's getting arrested. Sister looks at me and she says, Norma, when we say we believe in something and then we just run away because things get tough, then we don't really stand for anything and we're no one. So we both cannot get arrested because somebody needs to take care of the families at the shelter. So you decide who's going to stay, you know. And so I looked at her. I saw she's old. I'm young. I guess it's me, right? And so she says, okay, bye. And she takes off and she leaves me there. And so there you have it. I'm the last one in the group because I kept pushing myself back until they just got to me. I put my hands together and they handcuffed me and they walked me out. For me, that moment was so transforming and oh my
mm.
God, it's like I'm getting arrested. Why? And that's when I started to realize what God was helping me define myself and what I stand for. Why was it important for me to stand up and defend the right for these people that I knew were hurting, were suffering, and were migrating to our country because of what we were causing over there in those countries? And I needed to be that voice, that presence that say it is wrong to do this. Just by the fact that I was there, all of this stuff would just comes into my mind and realize, Norma, you believe in defending life and it's wrong what is happening to these families. These families don't need to be migrating and risking their lives. And you see in the horrible way they arrive to our shelter and how much need they have and all the horrible stories they share. If we can do something to question that, we should. And I was doing that by saying, I don't agree with what we're doing as a country. I think that we can do better and not contribute to the pain and suffering of these families. And so I got arrested.
Wow. What was the rest of the story? Did you do jail time? Did the US stop sending weapons to
Well, I don't know about that because I don't remember whether they did or not. I think they didn't stop. The fact that what happened didn't really cause a dent in history at all. But you go before the judges, are you guilty? Are you innocent? And I discovered the most everybody said, no contest. And that meant that, okay, that means no contest. You don't plead guilty or innocent, but the judge will determine and they will let you go. But I said I was innocent. So I had to go to court.
Oh,
And so I went to court. I had this attorney that came over and said, Sister, don't worry. We're going to take care of you. I'll go before the judge, and they allow me to be released until the court date. And
oh,
so I go before the court, and they started to decide whether what I did was wrong. The attorney said, You cannot talk. Let us
mm,
handle it. I started hearing that in the court they were saying a lot of lies, of things that the office did and I did. And I said, That's not true. That's not what happened. But I couldn't talk. The attorney said, No problem. This case was going to be dismissed. They're making so many technical mistakes. And well, it turns out that they did find me guilty and sentenced me for 5 years in prison. So they took me to the probation officer, they processed me, and then they released me because of the fact that I had never ever done anything wrong in my life. And so they put
right.
me on probation.
Oh my goodness.
The next day, the attorney said, Sister, your case was appealed
Huh.
and was dismissed instantly.
Oh my
So that was
goodness.
the end of it. Isn't that amazing? The interesting thing is, I got a call from a local college, the university there in the area, and the professor asked me, Sister, would you like to come talk to our students in a sociology class or something like that? And so I said, sure, just to
Hmm.
share my experience of what happened and what I did and why. And he tells me, the prosecutor, the woman that found you guilty, she was my student.
Oh,
And she came to me after the trial crying,
oh,
ashamed of herself, because she said to me, Everything you taught us that we need to stand up and defend and protect the rights of people, I completely ignored because I was told if you don't find her guilty, consider yourself fired. And so,
wow.
because she wanted to protect her job, she went ahead and found me guilty. And she said to the professor, she said, and her, the nun, she did stand up for what she believed. And so
Mm.
I said, okay, that feels like I've done something really good.
It's back to that courage that's so rooted in your love of God and your faith, your desire to share God's love with others. And I hear so much in your story about the necessity of taking risks for the sake of the gospel. You've described the Rio Grande Valley as a very beautiful and safe place. Yet, as I hear you describe your work and your story, I'm conscious of how much of what you do is complicated. There's so many systems, there's so many powers, so much politics, there's lack of resources, there's great need. Sister Norma, as you navigate all this, what are you discovering about the meaning of discipleship and what it really means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ?
I think that, as you describe of how the system and how the complicated of so many things, if you really think about it, you kind of would get scared and wonder, will I be able to navigate all of this? Will I be able to know what to do? And when we think about our ministry and our purpose, what we're doing for the church and who we are for God, if we really stop and think about it, we'll probably just paralyze ourselves and not do anything. And so I think that we put our hands in the hands of God, and He opens the waters like He opened the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And how Moses crossed through those fierce waters, those will open in our lives and things will fall in place, and you will get the words to know what to say and how to be present, and you will be able to make a difference in that moment where you need to say something or do something. We don't have to worry too much about how it's going to happen. If we trust God, He will guide us through it all.
Mm.
There, you'll be amazed of how much we can do if we just let Him be in charge.
Amen to that. So surrendering to God and letting the Spirit guide us.
Yes, definitely. We do it in a way that we start the day just simply thank you, God, for today, and
Yeah.
just guide me so that I can do the most I can for you in whatever it is that you need me today. And we will have the wisdom, we will have the know-how of what it is we need to do. And when we don't have to know. We don't have to worry. It will happen if it needs to happen.
Yes, amen to that. So, this podcast is called Messy Jesus Business, and we explore a lot of the messiness, the struggle, the complexities of living the gospel authentically in our modern times. I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to comment on regarding the messiness of Christian life.
Interestingly, when we started to respond to the immigrants here in South Texas, and when we started seeing them at the bus station and invited them to come to the parish hall of Sacred Heart, which was a block away from the bus station, and everybody that was arriving was in first 100, 200, 400 people. It was a lot of people, and a lot of stuff that was being donated because we were texting, and through social media we all started asking, hey, we need help, we need volunteers, we need food, we need pampers, we need everything, everything
Yeah.
a family needs just to be able to exist. And everything was just pouring in great multitudes, pyramids of stuff and clothing and everything. The response was so amazing. I guess, I don't know. I think that my message is that we just have to say yes.
Mm.
We just have to say yes to God, and He will take care of the rest. He will make things happen. We don't have to worry. His presence, I think, will open doors and open minds, open hearts. The miracle of life, the miracle of God's presence will be revealed. And that's what's
Mm.
amazing. And it happens just because we said, yes, God.
Amen to that. So we will put in the show notes and on our website on Messy Jesus Business how people can donate to Catholic charities in the Rio Grande Valley. Is there anything else you would like the listeners to know in particular about how they can support you in your wonderful work?
Thank you so much. You definitely can collect stuff that you think might be helpful, like anything from hygiene items to cold weather. We always need hoodies and clothing that's warm that you can always ship to us. And we don't use it, we will give it to a group parish that might need it, and they can give it to families that are poor. So anything you want to send to us, we would definitely make sure that somebody will make use of it and benefit from it. That's one
Great.
way. You can come volunteer. You can take some time off, whether it's on your vacation time, Christmas, spring break, summer. Come and spend a weekend, a week. Groups of students come from universities, from parishes, and they just
Mm.
spend a week here, and they love it. They just spending time with the kids and really just being part of what is happening. You live transformed. You live life. You've done something that was right in
Mm.
your life. And so I strongly encourage that if you can do that. You can also send money. Money is always
Yeah.
helpful. It helps us buy and get things that we don't get donated and that are sometimes necessary for the families. And we help not just people that are in the US side, but also people that are in the Mexican side, because
Mm.
those shelters and those places where they need help. And sometimes if I can help them, like make sure I get water for them or get food for them, get things that the shelter leaders ask me that they really need, I try to do that as well. So there's always someone in need that may benefit from your love and your care.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel commissioned and motivated. And even though we're miles and miles apart, I send you all my love and support. And
Thank you.
thank you so much for coming on Messy Jesus Business and
You
sharing
must.
your heart and your story, for bearing witness to the love of Christ to us and to the people of God that are there on the Rio Grande Valley. God bless you, Sister Norma.
Let us share the love of God to each other in every way possible. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Amen. Peace.
Adios.
Messy Jesus Business is produced and edited by Colin Wamskans. You can find us online at messyjesusbusiness.com and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. If you like what you heard, please be sure to mention our podcast to your friends and followers. And we'd love to have your support via Patreon. From the bottom of our hearts and the middle of the mess, thank you. Messy Jesus Business is produced in partnership with the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. You can learn more about our religious community and donate to our mission at www.fspa.org. humanitarianrespitecenter.org. I'm Sister Julia Walsh, and I'll catch up with you next time. Until then, peace and all good.